Thank you very much, Michelle, for that introduction, and good evening to everyone from Manila, Philippines. I'm thankful to the Lord for having the opportunity to share with you about living a life of integrity. On September 29, 2020, I read in Christianity Today the revelations about the sexual misconduct of Ravi Zacharias. I was heartbroken. What a huge tragedy that the best apologist for the Christian faith in our times is now remembered for his dark past. The best among us is a corrupt. But Ravi is not the only one. I know of many other Christian leaders whose sterling life and ministry have been eclipsed by sinful acts they committed out of a desire for fleeting and momentary pleasure. Integrity is foundational in one's life and ministry. In his message at the Cape Town 2010 Congress, Dr. Chris Wright posed this question to us, the 4,000 plus participants. He asked, what is the greatest hindrance to world evangelization today? He then gave his own answer. It's not other religions, not persecution. It is the church. Because we are indulging in the idolatry of power, idolatry of greed, and idolatry of success. Chris challenged every participant to be completely his, that is, to live a life of humility, integrity, and simplicity. This message made a great impact on me, so that when Doug Birdsall asked me in 2012 if I would lead the Luzon Integrity and Anti-Corruption Issue Network, I readily accepted. I believe that integrity and standing against corruption are essential to Christian witness in our personal lives, our families, and the larger society. In June 2013, I led a workshop on integrity and anti-corruption at the first Global Leadership Forum of Luzon in Bangalore, India. Our group came up with a profile of a person of integrity as moral in character, ethical in action, truthful in dealings, accountable at all times, and actively engaged in transforming the society. This evening, I want to talk about the prophet Daniel, who is a model of the power of integrity. How could a young man, taken as a captive and brought to a foreign land as an exile, become so successful that he outlasted his detractors and even his conquerors? Daniel served both King Nebuchadnezzar and his successor. He even outlasted the Babylonian Empire and served the kingdom of Persia. Integrity was the key to Daniel's staying power and sterling ministry. We can derive 7 lessons from Daniel about living a life of integrity. First, we need to establish our standards. When he was training for the king's service, Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with the food or wine from the king's table. Therefore, he asked the chief of the eunuchs to allow him not to defile himself. Daniel 1:8. We need to recognize our identity in Christ and establish our standards in upholding this identity. If we know who and whose we are, we can set appropriate boundaries and standards that will govern our lives. Billy Graham's life was impeccable because he formulated and lived by a code of ethics known as the Modesto Manifesto. He also demanded that all who work with him must uphold his ethical standards. The second lesson we find from Daniel on living a life of integrity is we need to nurture our faith in God. When Daniel was already serving in the king's palace, Nebuchadnezzar had a disturbing dream. And he threatened to kill all the wise men and advisors, and that includes Daniel and his friends, if they could not tell him both the dream and its interpretation. Daniel sought mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery so that he and his companions will not be destroyed. And the mystery was revealed to him in a vision at night. The lesson here is when facing difficult situations like Daniel did, we need to nurture our faith in God, recognize that nothing is impossible with him, and trust in his divine intervention. Daniel gave full credit for the revelation he received. Or he gave God actually the full credit for the revelation he received. He told King Nebuchadnezzar, No wise men, enchanters, magicians, astrologers can show to the king the mystery that the king had asked. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. We see that Daniel recognized the normal limitations of men, but he declared his confidence in his great God. The third lesson we find from Daniel: for having a life of integrity, we need to secure accountability partners. Daniel was not a lone ranger. His friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were his accountability partners. They formed a strong band of prayer bond. Likewise, we also need to build a team of godly partners to walk with us and help us, especially in difficult times. In the late 1980s, Gordon MacDonald was president of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship in the United States. But he fell into an adulterous relationship and had to step down from his position. By the grace of God, he was able to rebound from his fall. In his first message about his restoration, Gordon shared that one of the key factors leading to his moral failure was the absence of proper accountability relationships in his life. We need to be accountable to a group of fellow believers who care for us. I have counseled people who committed a moral infraction when no one was checking on them. Looking back, they wish they had someone to talk to about their struggles. Now let's go to the fourth lesson we find from Daniel on how to live a life of integrity, and that is we need to look after the interests of others. Although we certainly need accountability partners like he did, let's be careful not to selfishly engage them just for our own sake. We should look after the interests of others, or the best interests of others, so as to support our mutual welfare and development. We need to emulate Daniel. He remembered his partners, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when he was promoted to a position of power. In chapter 2, he said he endorsed them to the king, who in turn appointed Daniel's three colleagues to oversee the affairs of the province. The fifth lesson we derive from Daniel's experience is we need to speak the truth. We see in chapter 4 that Daniel gave a truthful advice to his superior. King Nebuchadnezzar had another dream, which signified a coming period of insanity as God's way of humbling him for his arrogance. In interpreting the dream, Daniel spoke the truth to Nebuchadnezzar in love. Daniel confronted him and yet assured him that he would be restored to sanity and to his position when he turned to God. And then in chapter 5, Daniel pronounced God's judgment on the abusive King Belshazzar, the son and successor of Nebuchadnezzar. He interpreted the handwriting on the wall as the wickedness and sacrilege of Belshazzar. Like Daniel, we should not be afraid to speak truth to power. We can confront the high and the mighty with confidence that we are declaring the word that comes from God. The sixth lesson we find from Daniel on living a life of integrity: we need to allow no chink in our armor. We need to be aware of any weak point that can lead us to failure. Even strong and successful people who are not mindful of his or her weaknesses, or who has a skeleton in their closet, have a serious chink in their armor. In Daniel 6, the high officials and satraps look for a basis to complain against Daniel to the king, but they cannot find any fault in him because he was faithful and prudent. Daniel made sure that he had no chink in his armor. 1 John chapter 2, verse 15 and 16 reminds us of the enemy's three preferred points of attack: the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. In other words, the temptations of money, sex, and power. Let us flee from all of this. We can protect and insulate ourselves from false accusations by making sure that we have no chinks in our armor that give the enemy a pathway to assault our integrity. Let us be like the Apostle Paul, who said in Acts 24:16, I always take pains to have a clear conscience before God and man. The final lesson we have from Daniel: to live a life of integrity, we need to be a warrior child of God. Daniel's detractors tricked the Persian emperor to promulgate an edict that no one should pray to anyone except the emperor. Anyone who violated this decree would be thrown into the den of lions. Their deceitful plan was actually aimed at eliminating Daniel, but Daniel did not flinch in his trust in God. Despite the edict, Daniel did not stop his daily habit of praying to God 3 times a day. He did not fear any trouble because he had faith in God. We too can trust if we can stand, and we too can trust that if we stand firm in our God, He will enable us to face any threat in life with peace of mind. Now, notice that Daniel prepared for the big storm that came in his life by coming before God faithfully and regularly every day. This warrior took refuge in the strength of his great commander-in-chief. One of my favorite songs is composed by Twyla Paris, "The Warrior is a Child." It contains these words: "Lately, I've been winning battles left and right, but even winners can get wounded in the fight. People say that I'm amazing. I'm strong beyond my years, but they don't see inside of me. I'm hiding all the tears. They don't know that I come running home when I fall down. They don't know who picks me up when no one is around. I drop my sword and cry for just a while, because deep inside this armor, the warrior is a child." We can be victorious because as warriors, we are children of God and we can trust Him completely. Sadly, Ravi Zacharias, one of my Christian heroes, did not act as a warrior child of God. I grieve as one among those who were not able to help, being unaware of the concealed wounds he had carried alone to his grave. I grieve, especially that by concealing his wounds, he lost his battle. In contrast, Daniel was a warrior in prayer and in action. He trusted he trusted God with the faith of a child. He lived a life of integrity, marked by total consistency between what was inside him and what he displayed on the outside. As a result, he outlasted kings and kingdoms and lived a life of great impact. God can do that in your life as well. God bless you.